Welcome to a new Daily Top Askreddit video. Today's topic.
What is some shady info about a celeb that everyone seems to have forgotten about? Brett Favre stole millions meant for the poorest people in Mississippi and has yet to be held accountable. He also sent unsolicited dick pics to female reporters. Also regularly cheated on his wife with women in the Green Bay area while he was out at the local bars. Would have his offensive linemen stand guard while he took them to the basement or parking ramp. I live in Chicago, so he is generally disliked here. My neighbor's boyfriend said he liked him. I said, well, he stole money from poor kids and he sent dick pics. His response was, well, I don't know about that stuff. My response, well, now you do. He is a piece of shit. What's sad is that people choose to ignore this stuff about a lot of famous people. It's why so many pieces of shit still get into power or make music, movies. You could cut the head off a newborn baby if you were famous and someone will still be on your side. Anytime I hear about him these days it just gets worse. Good grief, what an awful person he is. It's such a damn shame, too. He was my fucking hero growing up in the 90s in Wisconsin. It sucks so bad knowing how he ended up few. The Mississippi welfare scandal is one of the wildest stories that somehow didn't stay in headlines long. Jack Nicholson once beat a sex worker so badly she had brain damage. And Roman Polanski used Jack's house to rape a 13-year-old girl. 12. Then he left the country, avoiding persecution forever. I listened to a podcast about Jack and OMG. I mean, I never assumed that he was the best guy ever, but damn. Kind of a pig. The podcast is what a creep if anyone is interested. That Caitlyn Jenner caused a car accident that ended up killing someone. Vince Neil from Motley Crue killed a guy due to Neil's drinking while driving. Found guilty of DUI and vehicular manslaughter, he did a couple weeks in jail and paid a huge fine. Not just a guy, Razzle, the drummer of Hanoi Rocks, topped their American tour and basically led to the band breaking up later. Buckle up, buckaroos! ! So did Laura Bush. So did Matthew Broderick. Mark Wahlberg was a really bad dude. Here in Boston, among the older locals, he is considered trash. And it wasn't any single incident, but many. Growing up, my best friend was what I'd call fairly sheltered. While her parents didn't go the total denial route, they vetted and controlled pretty much every piece of media she consumed. A lot of things were off limits. Strongly encouraged things like reading classic lit over TV watching all day. Video games were a big no-no. My friend had no formative rotten.com horror stories, etc. My mom was, and is, the opposite, a Salem Lights chain smoking, celebrity gossip obsessed, Young and the Restless and Springer lover. I had pretty much free reign to watch and consume what I liked. My mom also has zero fucking filter. My mom constantly tells a story about how they were talking about Planet of the Apes, and best friend's mom brought up how she had a thing for Mark Wahlberg. My mom immediately brought up how H has really rehabbed his image from pants-dropping Marky Mark and beating up Asian people. She talks about this look of absolute horror that came across my friend's mom's face because she had no clue and what? Oh yeah. Goes on to explain Mark Wahlberg's past. Apparently my mom will never forget the look of horror that just grew and grew. Feel like your first paragraph has nothing to do with the rest of the story. LMFAO. Boy George tied a male sex worker to a radiator and beat him severely. My parents grew up in the same town as Boy George and visited the same clubs, went to the same gigs as he did, etc. My dad swears that Boy George tried to rape his friend and he only just managed to escape. Similar to Rick James and his girlfriend imprisoning a woman and burning her with a crack pipe. With a pipe. Steven Tyler groomed a girl who he was legally responsible for after he'd convinced her mother to hand over legal guardianship. And I see that slimy pedo on TV all the time, treated like rock royalty. Repulsive. Didn't he also just abandon her at some point even though he was her guardian? After he made her get the abortion, he left her for someone else. I believe that's the same girl whom he forced into a teenage abortion, which he physically attended and snorted cocaine during, Julia Holcomb. She filed a lawsuit against him in the early 2020s IIRC. Tyler's argument against the sexual assault and forced abortion charge was that he was her legal guardian at the time, hence he had immunity. The whole thing is so gross, sick and twisted. My heart aches for Julia and what she went through. Paul Walker dating 16-year-olds in his 30s and not just on one occasion. Not just any 16-year-old, either, but from what I recall, she was his daughter's best friend. Well, that's gross. Jesus Christ, what's wrong with these people? Well, at least he's not doing it anymore. Damn, this thread is teaching me that Hollywood celebrities should not be put behind a wheel. Or within 25 feet of girls under 18. Or on a pedestal. Wesley Snipes dated Halle Berry and hit her so hard she has permanent partial hearing loss. That time in 2018 when Lindsay Lohan attempted to kidnap a Syrian refugee family's child on Instagram Live, followed him as they tried to leave, and got punched in the face when she tried to physically grab the child from his mother. I remember watching that. She was speaking in an Arabic accent that she pulled out of nowhere. I don't care how long she was living over there. Now she's on the cover of Vogue Arabia. She also repeatedly stole from friends and acquaintances, and when they spoke up she would have other people like Nicole Richie bully them into silence. Edit, adding the story because Paul should know how mean Nicole Richie was. Lohan, whose normally chummy relationship with Lauren recently turned sour, scurried into her former pal's bedroom, her bodyguard tagging along, and gathered up huge armfuls of clothes, purses and belts, a source tells Star. Almost everything was expensive, designer items, things Hastings picked up on various modeling shoots or bought at high-end designer stores. In all, the source says Lindsay and her bodyguard left with an estimated $10,000 in merchandise, which she ordered her security man to load into her car. The mutual friends saw Lindsay leaving with everything, but she just didn't think that Lindsay would actually be lying about the clothes and steal their friends' things. At the time, she was under the impression that Lindsay and Lauren were still friends. That is, until Lauren came home the following day and flipped out. She started yelling, "Where are all of my clothes? Where are my things?" Lauren sent Lindsay a text message threatening to go to the police and press charges, a source said. Friends were out clubbing with Lindsay when she got the messages, and at least one Lohan pal said the starlet responded by laughing uproariously. Lindsay just told her she was delusional and claimed Lauren didn't know what she was talking about. She insisted the items weren't stolen because they did belong to her. Then she'd laughed to her friends about it. She thought the whole thing was hysterical, a source said. Lindsay was at the nightclub Hyde in LA. At the time, sitting next to friends Nicole Richie and famed DJ Samantha Ronson, and began passing around her BlackBerry to show off the exchange, causing the girls to burst out in laughter. Lindsay texted Lauren that she was a fat bitch, a friend of Lauren's says. Nicole Richie also chimed in, a source said, and told Lauren that Lindsay would return the clothes after they cut them up. Nicole wrote that she and Lindsay were going to cut holes in Lauren's jeans because Lauren was so fat and her jeans didn't fit, our source notes. Then Nicole told Lauren that if she went to the cops, she would regret it, our insider said. The background story here is that Lauren Hastings, the victim of the theft, had briefly dating DJ AM after his breakup from Nicole. This is the text Nicole sent to Lauren: "Are you okay? I know you have nothing, but Jesus fin Christ. Are you so desperate for new clothes you're willing to file a police report to get some? I'll go to Goodwill for you, pick out a nice pair of pants for you to wear and split them open because you're so fin huge. If you're going to do drugs, at least have something to show for it. Lose some damn pounds and get a life. You're ***ing delusional and pathetic and embarrassing. Next time you write Lindsay, you'll be dealing with the wrath of me. Consider this a warning. Nicole Richie. P.S. Blow a horn." Back in the day, Nicole basically bullied Rachel Zoe, feeding the press that she was anorexic and all this stuff. Then stole her whole vibe and look. She herself losing a shit ton of weight. House of Harlow was bit right off of Rachel's personal style and own line. Everyone used to talk about it. Doesn't surprise me that Rachel stopped styling. I work with the super rich, and my last client, who had ties to the UAE, told me that none of her friends like to hang out with Lindsay Lohan BC. She steals from all their yachts. John Lennon almost beat a person to death over allegations of being gay. Beat his first wife too. Imagine all the people, living life in peace. And alienated his son. McCartney wrote Hey Jude as an ode to Julian. Chris Brown physically abusing Rihanna. I feel like this is the craziest one that people literally just ignored and forgot about as fast as possible. A lot of the other ones people of this generation or this sort of age don't know about because they happened in the 1960s, but this one is pretty ridiculous for people to just ignore. I think what's worse is that no one forgot, but people didn't care enough, or rather they celebrate both him and the violence. Forgetting would have been better than condoning. He tried to kill her. I don't get it. Why is he still around and seems to have fans? WTF is wrong with the world? Dr. Seuss was having an affair while his wife was going through cancer treatments. After she committed suicide, partly because of his infidelity, he married his affair partner. Can I make cancer worse? I can. I must be a real cunt. Green eggs and ham. 1 bitch, 2 bitch, dead bitch, new bitch. Her suicide note was so sad. Dear Ted, what has happened to us? I don't know. I feel myself in a spiral, going down, into a black hole from which there is no escape, no brightness. And loud in my ears from every side I hear, failure, failure, failure. I love you so much. I am too old and enmeshed in everything you do and that I cannot conceive of life without you. My going will leave quite a rumor, but you can say I was overworked and overwrought. Your reputation with your friends and fans will not be harmed. Sometimes, think of the fun we had all through the years. What a terrible day to have eyes and feelings. This is not true. You, clean my muffin. Then you'd be happy to know that much of the criticism of him is completely false. The last time I saw this on Reddit, I decided to go back to the source and find out for myself what the basis of the rumors were. This led me to checking out all the major, non-juvenile, biographies on Dr. Seuss, of which there are 8. They all basically tell the same story. The facts are, Seuss's wife wasn't dying. Seuss's wife never had cancer. Seuss's wife Helen did battle polio when she was a child, which left her with a slight limp. In 1931, shortly after Helen and Seuss were married, she had an emergency ovariectomy, which left her unable to have children. To get through the issue, the couple invented a fictional child together named Chrysanthemum Pearl. Seuss would draw private pictures of the child for his wife. Their Christmas cards and other cards to friends and family would sometimes contain adventurous updates on the child, and the book The 500 Hats of Bartholomew Cubbins is dedicated to Chrysanthemum Pearl. In March 1954, Helen contracted Guillain-Barré syndrome, was paralyzed from the neck down and confined to an iron lung. Seuss stayed by her side throughout the ordeal. She began to recover in June, and in July she was well enough to go home. Doctors recommended she swim to aid in her recovery, so Seuss had a swimming pool installed in their backyard. By early 1955, she had made a near-complete recovery, though she did still experience occasional numbness in her lower extremities, but this was not life-threatening. In early 1957, she had a minor stroke, but she recovered within a few weeks. Later in 1957, Helen and Seuss launched their own publishing imprint, Beginner Books, with their friends, Bennett and Phyllis Cerf. This had been in the works for some time. Seuss had early arguments with Phyllis, so it was agreed he'd step back while Helen and Phyllis did most of the running of the company, and had their own contentious disagreements. Up until then, Helen had been very involved in Seuss's books, but from there on, she was not, and this created distance in their relationship. In fact, their marital problems may have gone back many more years. Biographer Philip Nell notes that Seuss had written a poem, Wife Up a Tree, published in 1953 in a magazine called This Week, which was about a husband with a nagging wife. Nell says it may have foreshadowed marital troubles, though it's uncertain. Regardless, many friends and family said that their relationship had always been marked by quite open friction, and this only got worse once they stopped collaborating and started working on their own individual projects in 1957. Seuss's editor recalled that in the 1960s, Seuss had confided in him that he was thinking about buying a studio outside the home because of the hostility within the house. His studio was in his house. He didn't, but the marriage was turning bad. Seuss had always preferred to work late, but after 1957, he started to keep almost nocturnal hours, while Helen woke up early, particularly because they lived in California and the Beginner Books business required her to communicate with New York publishing contacts. They saw less and less of each other. They began sleeping in separate bedrooms. It wasn't all bad, though. The couple had many friends and socialized regularly. They also raised a lot of money for charity, which is how Seuss met his second wife, Audrey Diamond. Audrey's husband was a doctor at the hospital that treated Helen during her bout with Guillain-Barré syndrome. Seuss and Helen took part in a fundraiser for the hospital, and that's where they met. The two couples became friends in about 1960, and were best friends within a couple years. Seuss's relationship with Audrey was only as friends for at least the first several years. It was only in about 1965 that there may have been an affair, after several more years of contention between Seuss and his wife Helen. It's not confirmed that Seuss actually cheated on his wife sexually. Audrey gave conflicting statements. In 1995, her statement to biographers Judith and Neil Morgan insinuated that their relationship wasn't consummated until after Helen had died, meaning she, Audrey, had an affair since she was still married, but Seuss was a widower. In 2000, Audrey gave an interview to the New York Times where the reporter wrote that Audrey fell in love with Seuss and, in the wake of their affair, Helen committed suicide. But it doesn't actually say what the nature of the affair was before Helen's death. Some biographers have read into the 2000 interview that the affair was sexual before Helen's death, though these biographers, Nell and Jones, are careful to say that a sexual affair is not confirmed. Audrey never spoke publicly on the subject again. As already stated, at the time of Helen's death, she wasn't dying and she didn't have cancer. She did have some health issues, but none of them life-threatening. She was on pain medication. The year before she committed suicide, her brother had died, and biographer Charles D. Cohen suggests this may have been a contributing factor to her depression and suicide, along with the breakdown of her marriage. Shortly before Helen committed suicide, in September 1967, Seuss took her on a month-long vacation to Colorado, one of Helen's favorite places. It is unknown what happened during this time, but it's generally assumed that Seuss was trying to rehabilitate their marriage, whether because of an actual sexual affair on his part or if it was more an emotional affair he'd been having with Audrey. A few days after they returned to California, they went out to dinner with some friends, and then a few days after that, they went on a weekend yachting trip with some other friends. Shortly after that, on October 23, 1967, she committed suicide by overdosing on pills. Both the Seuss's niece and the personal assistant recalled to biographers that Helen had often talked negatively about spending her twilight years as an invalid due to the effects of post-polio syndrome and her recovery from Guillain-Barré syndrome. Her health was deteriorating, but not in a life-threatening way. She was still able to walk unassisted but was having increasing trouble walking up and down stairs. Both her niece and assistant suspected that, being 69 years old, and faced with a future that was only going to get worse health-wise, while Seuss was in much better health than she was, he was also 6 years younger than her. Her suicide was in part caused by her desire not to be a burden on her husband or her family. In other words, if there truly was an affair, it was only one part of Helen's decision. Her suicide note doesn't actually talk about an affair, but talks about the breakdown of her marriage with Seuss, which had been going on for a decade, and for many years before Seuss ever even met his second wife, let alone started to get emotionally close to her. The note could be read that, after the Colorado trip, Seuss had perhaps resolved to leave Helen, and told her so, though there's no evidence that that was the case. He had not contacted any lawyer or made any other financial decisions or life changes that would suggest it. Nor had Audrey. That said, several biographers do suspect that Seuss's relationship with Audrey was confirmed to Helen shortly before Helen's suicide, though none of their friends could substantiate that claim. It's not a happy story, but it's also a pretty ordinary story. Seuss's behavior wasn't all that different from how many marriages end. He certainly wasn't abandoning a dying woman when, if, he had the affair, and by all accounts, at the end of Helen's life, he did make efforts to reinvigorate their marriage. But this did not work, and Helen died. He was very distraught by it. He told a friend, "I didn't know whether to kill myself, burn the house down, or just go away and get lost." He did jump rather quickly into his new relationship with Audrey, though even this was after several months of grieving alone, during which time he wrote the footbook. The book contains no dedication, but considering the issues Helen had had with her feet and legs, it's not a stretch to say it was written with her in mind. The rumors that Helen had cancer and was dying seem to stem from an unsourcedabout.com article that was used as the basis for those claims in Drive. Seuss's Wikipedia entry. I suspect that the author thought Guillain-Barré syndrome was some form of cancer. It's not, and embellished from there. Pretty much all claims on the internet just took the Wikipedia article as fact, when it wasn't based on anything actually found in any Drive. Seuss biography, or any other fact-based source. For people who are reading this and don't believe me, feel free to do your own research. I found as many well-sourced published biographies on Dr. Seuss as I could, and none of them mention anything about Helen having cancer or having life-threatening health issues at the time of her suicide. The most they say is that her health was slowly deteriorating, and she worried about what that portended for her future. Their marriage had been in trouble for some time, and despite efforts by them to mend fences, it did not work out. Biographies consulted, Cohen, Charles D. 2004. The Seuss, The Whole Seuss and Nothing But the Seuss, a visual biography of Theodore Seuss Geisel. Dean, Tanya, 2002. Theodore Geisel. Fench, Thomas, 2001. The Man Who Was Dr. Seuss, The Life and Work of Theodore Geisel. Jones, Brian J., 2019. Becoming Drive. Seuss, Theodore Geisel and the Making of an American Imagination. MacDonald, Ruth K. 1988. Dr. Seuss. Morgan, Judith, Morgan, Neal, 1995. Dr. Seuss and Mr. Geisel, A Biography. Nell, Philip, 2004. Dr. Seuss, American Icon. Pease, Donald E. 2010. Theodore Seuss Geisel. They say there's an Adderall shortage. I think we might have just found out who it's all going to. And his affair partner after they were married abandoned her kids and erased the work his original wife put into his books.